I thought I'd start off with a quote by feminist theorist Joanne Smith, as found on page 3 of the 1993 revised edition of her 1989 book Misogynies. In October 1991, the House of Lords removed a centuries-old right from the men of England and Wales. It stopped them raping their wives. I exaggerate, of course. Even the highest court in the land cannot prevent husbands from forcing their wives to have sex against their will, but it did remove the immunity from prosecution they had enjoyed since 1736. In that year, a ruling by a 17th century judge, Sir Matthew Hale, was published and stated as a definitive statement of law. According to Hale, a woman agreed to have sex when she married and could never ever change her mind. He said, "A husband cannot be guilty of a rape committed by himself upon his lawful wife, for by their mutual matrimonial consent and contract, the wife hath given herself up in this kind unto her husband, which she cannot retract." Even the English law lords, all male and by no means radical, found this hard to stomach in 1991, upholding the conviction of a 38-year-old man jailed for assaulting and attempting to rape his estranged wife. They agreed that Hale's ruling was an anachronistic and offensive fiction. This passage, while poignant, is wrong about one thing. This law was not anachronistic by the standards of the 1990s. As Estelle B. Friedman notes in her 2002 book, No Turning Back, page 288, only 17 countries considered marital rape a crime in 1998. But still, we might think that these laws, damaging as they were simply an example of societies being slow to adjust, and that these attitudes were in fact centuries old. But in reality, we have examples of these laws that excuse men's rape of their intimate partners being updated for the current situation. As Andrea Dworkin writes in Pornography, Men Possessing Women, 1981, page 103, in 13 states the right of marital rape has been extended by statute to cohabitation. In 5 of those states, a man who rapes a so-called voluntary social companion is partially protected by statute. In one of those states, West Virginia, he is fully protected. This, then, was not simply an oversight. Even as marriage became less important and cohabitation without marriage became more acceptable, the idea that a man could rape his long-term significant other remained a present enough notion in people's minds for this idea to be extended. I bring this up to show that we in the West are not too far removed from this way of looking at marriage and women more generally, and thus any ideology, which not only seemingly, but inescapably, encourages this way of looking at women, must be opposed as a serious threat to women's hard-won rights in this regard. For if we are to continue to fight against marital rape in the many countries where it is still legal, we cannot tolerate an ideology that would undermine this fight. So in this video I'm going to be talking about how the Quran supports marital rape, in particular this verse here. Surah 2, 223. Your wives are a place of sowing of seed for you. So come to your place of cultivation however you wish and put forth righteousness for yourselves, and fear Allah, and know that you will meet him, and give good tidings to the believers. Here are a few other translations, and in particular this one I think sounds a lot less clunky. Muhammad Sawa, your wives are as fields for you. You may enter your fields from any place you want. Reserve something good for your souls for the life hereafter, having fear of God and knowing that you are going to meet him. Muhammad, give the glad news to the believers. There is difficulty translating that word, harthtun, since it broadly refers to the process of sowing and reaping crops. Thus, it is commonly translated to tilth, although this translation is rather useless since most people don't know what a tilth is, and tilth isn't even recognized as a word by my Microsoft spell checker. And this is why many will instead simply insert the definition, the place that you sow your seeds. But like I say, this is clunky. The best translation, the most easily comprehensible and accessible, would be to say farmland. This is why I like the honesty of using the word field, although a field is a bit non-specific, hence why farmland is the best word here. It communicates exactly what this verse is saying, that your wives are the place where you plant your seed, meaning you ejaculate in their womb, and therefore, just as your farmland is yours to do with as you please, so too are your wives. And from the absence of any translations using the term farmland, I can only assume that translators are conscious of how that might sound, and want to try and obscure what this verse is saying as much as they can. But I don't want to obscure what this verse is saying, so to avoid being accused of such, and also because I think it's good practice anyway, let's read the whole passage, from the verse, also known as ayah, 222 through to 227, beginning, Surah 2, 222, and they ask you about menstruation. Say, it is harm, so keep away from wives during menstruation, and do not approach them until they are pure, and when they have purified themselves, then come to them from where Allah has ordained for you. Indeed, Allah loves those who are constantly repentant and loves those who purify themselves. Okay, so we start off by saying that women are impure because of menstruation, basically demonizing womanhood. This is especially ironic since many Muslim apologists will argue that this next verse is complimenting women because being the place where life is made is a good thing to be respected, but menstruation, which is an instrumental part in a woman's fertility, is called impure. And then we get the offending verse. Surah 2, 223, your wives are a place of sowing of seeds for you, so come to your place of cultivation however you wish and put forth righteousness for yourselves, and fear Allah, and know that you will meet Him, and give good tidings to the believers. Followed by Surah 2, 224 to 227, and do not make your oath by Allah an excuse against being righteous and fearing Allah, and making peace among people. And Allah is hearing and knowing. Allah does not impose blame upon you for what is unintentional in your oaths, but He imposes blame upon you for what your hearts have earned, and Allah is forgiving and forbearing. For those who swear not to have sexual relations with their wives is a waiting time of 4 months, but if they return to normal relations, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful. And if they decide on divorce, then indeed Allah is hearing and knowing. Now, if some of that seems scarcely even coherent, don't worry, it's not your fault. The Quran is notoriously poorly written and difficult to understand. Sometimes it's straight up impossible to understand. Take, for example, that statement, for those who swear not to have sexual relations with their wives is a waiting time of 4 months. But if they return to normal relations, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful. Does this mean that abstaining from sexual relations with your wife is bad, but if you stop abstaining and return to have sex with them, then Allah will forgive you for having abstained in the first place? Or does this mean that abstaining from sexual relations with your wife is good, but if you stop abstaining and returning to have sex with them, then Allah will forgive you for having failed to abstain? And this is ignoring the fact that the parenthetical remarks are all additions. They are there to try and make it easier to understand. This can get ridiculous when you're dealing with some Quran verses that have more parenthetical clarifications than actual original Quranic text. Like I say, the Quran is very difficult to understand, and that's why you haven't really read the Quran until you've read a tafsir. A tafsir, for those who don't know, is a commentary on the Quran that appeals to primary Islamic sources, mostly hadith, in order to explain the context of the original passage. Now, this isn't like Christianity, where commentaries are considered to be of a very much ancillary nature, because the Bible is typically easy to understand and well written. There are confusing passages, of course, and commentaries are useful, but there are significant chunks of the Bible, especially the epistles, that explain themselves as clearly as the best commentary. No, with the Quran, it is literally indecipherable without a commentary. Yes, this does leave a big gaping hole for corruption to sneak in. If the Quran is hard to interpret and anybody can just write a commentary and interpret it, then you're not really following Allah or Muhammad, but simply some random dude's interpretation of it. What you need is a critically acclaimed tafsir, well regarded for using the highest quality Islamic sources to give the best possible understanding of what the Quran is really saying. Enter Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Not only is it really nice to say, sort of rhythmic in a way, Tafsir Ibn Kathir, and so on, but it's also objectively the best commentary going on the Quran, except for the other commentary which is better. Everybody loves it, even though we only have partial English translations because they're too afraid to translate some of the really messed up stuff into English. But let's just ignore that. Oh, and a lot of academics don't really like it, but we're not talking about academics, we're talking about Islamic orthodoxy. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that Islamic standards for historical reliability are both contrary to academic standards and wildly inconsistent in their own right. See, the earliest commentary, Tafsir al-Tabari, which is not so coincidentally considered the best, was completed 250 years after Muhammad's death. Now, I know that it might sound a bit awkward that we have a book that's very hard to understand, and the only way to understand it is with commentaries, and the earliest commentary we have is from 250 years after Muhammad's death. However, you need to remember that these commentaries are based on the eyewitness accounts found in the Hadith, the earliest of which was completed just over 200 years after Muhammad's death. But like we say, it's either accept texts written 200 plus years later as authoritative, or just accept that we'll never be able to really understand half of what the Quran is going on about. So just stop worrying about the date, you nerd. Still, when it comes to Christianity, make sure that you constantly bring up that some contemporary scholars place the Gospel of John as being written 60 to 80 years after Jesus' death, because that proves it isn't to be trusted, right? However, if you want to read al-Tabari's Tafsir, you better learn Arabic, because they haven't translated it into English yet. I could find a text that partially translated it to English, but the commentary on Surah 2, 223 wasn't there. So if you don't have time to learn Arabic because you're trying to upload videos with more consistency, then you turn to Ibn Kathir, considered the second most reliable tafsir by your standard Muslim, written about 700 years after the death of Muhammad. So let's see what it says. This is all accessible on archive.org because somebody actually bothered to translate this text, so I'm going to read most of the text except for any small asides I might consider to be irrelevant, but I will show you the whole text so you can pause and read everything to see if I'm misrepresenting. Anyway, the reason behind revealing Allah's statement, "Your wives are a tilth for you," Allah said, "Your wives are a tilth for you." Ibn Abbas commented, meaning the place of pregnancy. Okay, so it's now defined what it means by saying tilth. It's the place where you get your wife pregnant. Basically, your wife is a baby maker. But to be fair, it doesn't say that's all the wife is, so we'll let it off. Allah then said, "So go to your tilth when or how you will," meaning wherever you wish from the front or behind, as long as sex takes place in one valve, the female sexual organ, as the authentic hadiths have indicated. Alright, so this is definitely in keeping with what we would assume from a cursory reading, that this verse is allowing husbands to do whatever they want with their wives with only the strictures of Islam, not the desires of the woman dictating what can't be done. For example, you can't do anal because Islam prohibits it, but you can have sex in whatever position you want because your wife is farmland for you. Now we get a whole load of hadiths to explain the specific context for this passage. For instance, Al-Bukhari recorded that Ibn al-Munkadir said that he heard Jabir say that the Jews used to claim that if one had sex with his wife from behind in the vagina, the offspring would become cross-eyed. Then, this ayah was revealed, "Your wives are a tilth for you, go to your tilth when or how you will." Muslim and Abu Dawood also reported this hadith. Ibn Abu Hatim said that Muhammad bin al-Munkadir narrated that Jabir bin Abdullah told him that the Jews claim to the Muslims that if one has sex with their wife from behind in the vagina, their offspring will become cross-eyed. Allah revealed afterwards, "Your wives are a tilth for you, so go to your tilth when or how you will." Ibn Jurayyi, one of the reporters of the hadith, said that Allah's messenger said, "From the front or from behind, as long as it occurs in the fajr, vagina." Imam Ahmad recorded that Ibn Abbas said, "The ayah, 'Your wives are a tilth for you,' was revealed about some people from the Ansar who came to the Prophet and asked him about having sex with the wife from behind. He said to them, 'Have sex with her as you like as long as that occurs in the vagina.'" Imam Ahmad recorded that Abdullah bint Sabit said, "I went to Hafsa bint Abdur Rahman bin Abu Bakr and said, 'I wish to ask you about something, but I am shy.' She said, 'Do not be shy, my nephew.' He said, 'About having sex from behind with women.' She said, Salama told me that the Ansar used to refrain from having sex from behind in the vagina. The Jews claim that those who had sex with the women from behind would have offspring with crossed eyes. When the Muhajirun came to Al-Madinah, they married Ansar women and had sex with them from behind. One of these women would not obey her husband and said, 'You will not do that until I go to Allah's messenger and ask him about this matter.' She went to Salama and told her the story. Salama said, 'Wait until Allah's messenger comes.' When Allah's messenger came, the Ansari woman was shy to ask him about this matter, so she left. Salama told Allah's messenger the story and he said, 'Summon the Ansari woman.' She was summoned and he recited this ayah to her, 'Your wives are a tilth for you, so go to your tilth when or how you will.' He added, 'Only in one valve, the vagina.' This hadith was also collected by At-Tamari, who said Hasan. An-Nasai reported that Ka'b bin Alqamah said that Abu an-Nadir said that he asked Nafi, 'The people are repeating the statement that you relate from Ibn Umar that he allowed sex with women in the rear, anus.' He said, 'They have said a lie about me, but let me But let me tell you what really happened. Ibn Umar was once reciting the Quran while I was with him and he reached the ayah, 'Your wives are a tilth for you, so go to your tilth when or how you will.' He then said, 'O Nafi, do you know the story behind this ayah?' I said no. He said, 'We, the people of Quraysh, used to have sexual intercourse with our wives from the back in the vagina. When we migrated to Al-Madinah and married some Ansari women, we wanted to do the same with them. They disliked it and made a big issue of it. The Ansari women had followed the practices of the Jews who have sex with their women while they lay on their sides. Then Allah revealed, 'Your wives are a tilth for you, so go to your tilth when or how you will.' This has an authentic chain of narrators. So if we look at the passage, we see the clear meaning of the verse. If your wives don't want to have sex with you a particular way, that doesn't matter because they're your wives. So have sex with them however you want. Indeed, in the time I've spent asking Muslims about this passage, I've always used this tafsir to show that clear meaning of this verse. So it came as a surprise to me when one day I was speaking to a Muslim and I brought up this verse, and before I could even bring up the tafsir, they brought it up and said, 'If you read Tafsir Ibn Kathir, you'll see how you are misinterpreting the verse. They caught me off guard, since I've been using the very same tafsir to validate that this verse is indeed talking about the right of a man to have sex with his wife however he wishes. So I asked what they meant in saying that it showed how I was taking this verse out of context. They responded by quoting the tafsir at me, hadith by hadith, but not making any effort to explain how the hadiths were supposed to be changing my understanding of the verse. Now, as it happens, the entire conversation had been based on false pretenses, because I'd been assuming that this person I was talking to understood marital rape to be a bad thing. I was mistaken. I sent a transcript of our conversation to my partner, but apparently Skype can't save conversation logs going back more than a couple of months, so I have to roughly paraphrase. Basically, the Muslim said, well, obviously the wife can't just keep the husband from having sex with her, he has rights too. At which point I asked, right, but that would be rape though, right? And they replied, how can it be rape if she is your wife? That makes no sense. This is why I started by talking about how recently it was that the illegality of raping your wife was firmly established in many countries. Because in many Muslim societies, which can often be centuries behind the West, they are unsurprisingly not doing any better than the West when it comes to recognizing that forcing your wife to have sex with you is wrong. Indeed, they're substantially behind, and that's why it's so hard to find any Muslim who is able to explain why Surah 2:223 means anything other than that a husband is the ultimate decider when it comes to sex with his wife, whether she wants it or not. Most Muslims don't even think there is anything here to defend. It's important to understand that many Muslims still have a very outdated understanding of what rape is, which is to say, for many, rape exists with a mind towards a patriarchal understanding of women as property, farmland, if you can imagine such a thing. Hopefully I will be able to find the clip, but in an Acts 17 Apologetics live broadcast, a Muslim wrote in and complained that they were wrong to characterize Islam as supporting rape with reference to the rape of female captives. He said, all the women that the men had sex with had been divorced or their husbands had been killed.
Baby-faced assassin says, if the parents consent, it's not rape, so it's halal. Guys, one thing we want everyone to understand here is how Muhammad and his practices and his teachings and his revelations have influenced the world. Think about what he's saying right here. If parents consent to you having sex with their little girl, then it's not rape. So according to Baby-faced assassin here, our champion Muslim apologist, it's not rape if you go in and climb on top of that girl because her parents said it's okay. Parents said it's fine. It's just not rape. You guys understand that? It's halal. It's halal. Now he would say, okay, you have to marry her, or if we went with the Muslim sources, even if you hired her for temporary marriage, muta, something like that, all of that would be fine. Or if you took her as your sex slave, your captive, or something like that, all of that would be fine. I'm hoping there's some level of reason that you would understand that is disgusting. To say this little girl, this 9-year-old girl, who has no clue what sex is, who has no idea, this guy's going to climb on top of her. She is going to have no idea what is going on until he rams his penis into her. And you're saying, but this is not rape. What do you mean by rape? See, guys, this is the point. In Islam, there's a reason. In Islam, did you know you can't actually rape your wife? They have no concept of that. I've seen Muslim scholars say they're making fun of America, and they say, did you know that in America you can rape your wife?
They're shocked.
And I don't mean you can force yourself upon your wife. They find it ridiculous that if you do force yourself on your wife, it's called rape, right? They can't comprehend, right? In Islam, rape is a sexual relationship that you are not permitted to have, right? You're doing something and you're not allowed to do it, right? So if you are allowed to do it, as in the case here, okay, her parents have said you can go climb on top of this 9-year-old girl. It's perfectly acceptable. They don't believe it's rape.
Exactly.
And you're seeing the influence. You're seeing the influence and the impact of Islam, and it's indisputable. It's right here. This is what Muslims are saying. Muslims are here in the chat saying, if your parents say, hey, you're 9 years old, I'm handing you off to this guy, and you say, I don't know what's going on, and he climbs on top of you and puts his penis inside of you without you having any clue or without you being in any way able to consent because you have no clue what's going on, it's perfectly acceptable in Islam. What a great, wonderful religion.
Now, for a minute, we'll ignore the fact that this is completely untrue. We have examples of Muhammad saying that it's okay for his followers to have sex with married female captives. But either way, whether a woman has a husband or not is not what makes it rape. What makes it rape is whether or not the woman consents to sex. However, if you view women as the property of men, then rape becomes a crime against somebody else's property. But if a woman becomes your wife and your slave, then rape is not a crime, because it's simply you doing as you please with your property. You are coming to your field how you wish, to use the Quran's wording. Indeed, I shouldn't say rape is not a crime, because many Muslims would simply deny that what is occurring is rape. How can it be rape if she is your wife? This is the logic that one gets out of reading Surah 2:223, not least of all when taking into account the commentary. Nonetheless, I have made an effort to try and understand how one might use the Ibn Kathir commentary to excuse these actions, and I came up with an argument. Please note, this is an argument I have never seen a Muslim present. It is the best argument I could come up with. If you were willing to add to the text, you could say that the only reason these women didn't want to have sex was because they thought their husbands weren't allowed to. Therefore, in this context, when the Muslim men were told that they could have sex with their wives however they liked, this met the one condition the women had for whether they were willing to perform this act. Now, firstly, the obvious problem here is that this is an awful way to communicate this message. If the message here is that no sexual position should be prohibited, then there's an easier way to say that. It's the way I just said it. But instead, the Quran inexplicably decided to communicate the message that no sexual position is prohibited by saying that your wives are farmland, so you can have sex with them however you like. The other problem here is that not only is this interpretation adding to the commentary, but it's also contradicting the commentary. The commentary says, when we migrated to Al-Madinah and married some Ansari women, we wanted to do the same with them. They disliked it and made a big issue out of it. Notice the contrast. We wanted it, they disliked it. And the judgment came down, they're your wives, they're where you ejaculate, they're farmland, so have sex with them however you want. Rather perversely, to interpret this as saying that the only reason the women didn't want to have sex this way was because they thought their husbands weren't allowed to, is to imply that the women were being in some way liberated to fulfill their true desires, and this was communicated by giving the men the right to have sex with their wives however they want. With this interpretation, the verse boils down to, women want men to use them however they want. Even when they disliked it and objected, they really wanted it. Therefore, when the Quran says that a man can have sex with his wife however he wants, that is justified. Indeed, it is liberation for women. That was the best I could do after trying my best to come up with the best interpretation for this account of events found in Ibn Kathir, and still, we cannot escape the obvious meaning of the text. By the way, you might be wondering what that bit towards the end of the text is where it says, and put forth righteousness for yourself. You might think that means basically to try and be nice or kind or respectful to your wife. You know, it's saying to be righteous, so maybe that's what being righteous means. Well, just to read a bit further on in Ibn Kathir we have, Allah said, and send for your own selves beforehand, meaning by performing the acts of worship while refraining from whatever Allah has prohibited to you. This is why Allah said afterwards, and fear Allah and know that you are to meet him in the hereafter, meaning he will hold you accountable for all your deeds, and give good tidings to the believers, O Muhammad, meaning those who obey what Allah has commanded and refrain from what he has prohibited. Ibn Jarir reported that Atta said, or related to Ibn Abbas, and send for your own selves beforehand means mention Allah's name by saying Bismillah before having sexual intercourse. Al-Bukhari also reported that Ibn Abbas narrated that Allah's messenger said, if any one of you on having sexual relations with his wife said, in the name of Allah, Allah, protect us from Satan and also protect what you bestow upon us, i.e. the coming offspring, from Satan. And if it is destined that they should have a child then, Satan will never be able to harm him. So no, it isn't saying anything about how you are treating the woman you're having sex with, it's simply saying that you should pray for yourself and your potential future offspring before having sex. What we see then is that the tafsir gives us strong evidence for concluding that this verse is excusing and in fact commanding marital rape. What's bizarre to me is that many Muslims will literally quote the tafsir back to you even after you have used it in your own argument. When I appealed to Muslims on Reddit to try and understand this verse, I had a private message exchange with somebody. As part of a longer message I sent them this. I think I may have been uncharitable for you, since the verse in question, 2:223, on the surface might not seem that bad before you look into it in more detail. Quran 2:223, your wives are a place of sowing of seeds for you, so come to your place of cultivation however you wish and put forth righteousness for yourselves, and fear Allah and know that you will meet him and give good tidings to the believers. But if we actually look into the wider context of this verse, particularly one of the most reputable tafsirs, Ibn Kathir, the insidious origins of the verse become more apparent. You can find the text here, but to summarize, there were a certain group of people who were against having sex in a particular position. The women from this area didn't want to have sex from behind, so the Quran says that your wives are the place where you sow seed, so it's up to you how you have sex with them. This is to say, the women's objections are utterly discounted, and men are given authority to have sex with their wives however they wish. And they replied with a link to a tafsir site before saying, this page has many tafsirs in it, but I will only quote Ibn Kathir as you wish. Sorry for the lengthy quote, but I tried my best to shorten it. So in response to my argument, which centered on Tafsir Ibn Kathir, they responded by simply copy and pasting Tafsir Ibn Kathir, albeit editing it down slightly. They didn't acknowledge the substance of my argument, or acknowledge that they were appealing to the very same source as me, And what's worse, in the message before that, they had said, "Really sorry for this inconvenience, but I want a clear mind to read and analyze your arguments, because I'm open to change my mind if your arguments are right. This has been very much my experience whenever I have tried to understand this verse from an Islamic perspective. No attempt to actually engage the argument, no apparent ability to even comprehend the argument, simply mindless quoting of sources without thinking about what the sources even say. And yes, I did offer up a response, and no, they didn't respond after that." Now, apart from this, Muslims will attempt to argue using other sources to show that sure, their interpretation of Surah 2:223 is a stretch, but it is justified by the other verses which show how 2:223 couldn't possibly mean what it's obviously saying. Now, the first response is the laziest and worst response, a generic passage in the Quran or the Hadith commanding Muslims to be kind to women or indeed to their wives. Now, I won't even go to the effort of quoting these sources because of course they're there. There are thousands of Quran verses and tens of thousands of Sahih Hadiths. Sahih means reliable if you didn't know. Unsurprisingly, there are plenty that command Muslims to love their wives. But the command in itself is a bit meaningless, because men throughout history have claimed to love their wives. The idea of loving your wife is not a uniquely egalitarian concept. Many sexists love their wives. Of course, this is easily conceivable in the case of microaggressions. A man who constantly interrupts or undermines or gaslights his wife will still say he loves her. He doesn't need to treat her as an equal in order to love her. I love my cat. Those who own dogs love their dogs. The love we have for our pet is still love, but it is not the love that we should give to a wife. But then this can even extend to physical beating. If I hit my cat when he bites me, I can justify it by saying that an animal cannot understand reason, so there must be an immediate physical consequence in order to discourage bad behaviour. The same can apply for a small child. One might argue that a child can't understand reasoned moral arguments, so a physical punishment is more appropriate. And I don't agree with this, but I wouldn't say that such a person does not love their child. So indeed, if somebody has an infantilized view of women, say if they consider the intellect of a woman to be half that of a man's, then it makes sense that they would say that striking a woman would be excusable. And of course, in the case of rape, as sickening as it is, there are men who claim that their rape is an act of love, because after all, isn't sex called making love? Isn't sex a way that people express love? So even if a woman is physically uncomfortable, if she is crying, if she is asking her husband to stop, the husband can fall back on the fact that sex is an expression of love. So of course he must love her, even if his entitlement mentality causes him to have sex with her whenever he wants. So, quite simply, to say that you love your wife means nothing. To love somebody does not mean to respect them as an equal, and even to say somebody is an equal must be a claim that is backed up by your actions. Now finally, I have to be fair and present to you the best response that I got in all the time that I have been asking Muslims about this issue, trying to make sure that this video was not just coming from ignorance without understanding the Muslim position, and the argument was simply the following quotation: Majmu' al-Fatawa 32-271, Muslim narrated in his Sahih 1006 from Abu Jar, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, the intimacy of one of you with his wife is a charity. They said, O Messenger of Allah, if one of us fulfills his desire, will he be rewarded for that? He said, do you not see that if he did it in a haram manner, there would be a burden of sin on him for that? Similarly, if he does it in a halal manner, he will be rewarded for it. In that case, what the wise husband must do is take care of his wife in that regard and give it priority over everything else so that he may keep her chaste, conceal her, and meet her needs as much as he can, even if he does not have an urgent need for that and even if he had to do it only for her, for the sake of meeting his wife's needs. In that there will be a reward for both of them, inshallah, and a means of help so that they attain spiritual and worldly well-being. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, causing harm to the wife by not having intercourse is grounds for annulment in all cases, whether the husband did that intentionally or otherwise, and whether he was able to do it or not, it is like maintenance and even more important. End quote. However, there is one issue. I searched for days to try and find this text in its original context, so I could read around it and actually find out the precise nature of this text, to no avail. But it does reference Sahih Muslim 1006, so let's look at that. Except when you look up Sahih Muslim 1006, you get a completely different text, because there are different numbering systems for hadith. I genuinely think that the death threats and things like that isn't the main reason people abstain from criticizing Islam. It's simply because it almost seems to be intentionally designed to be as confusing as possible to learn more about. But fortunately, if you're an alpha like me, you can find it anyway. And it reads in full, Abu Jar reported, some of the companions came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and they said, O Messenger of Allah, the rich have taken all the rewards. They pray as we pray, they fast as we fast, and they give charity from their extra wealth. The Prophet said, Has not Allah made for you ways to give charity? In every glorification of Allah is charity. In every declaration of His greatness is charity. In every praise of Him is charity. In every declaration of His oneness is charity. Enjoining good is charity and forbidding evil is charity. And in a man's intimate relations with his wife is charity. They said, O Messenger of Allah, is there a reward for one who satisfies his passions? The Prophet said, you see that if he were to satisfy his passions with the unlawful, it would be a burden of sin upon him. Likewise, if he were to satisfy himself with the lawful, he will have a reward. So there we go. Not necessarily a bad message. Just because you're poor, it doesn't mean you can't give charity. You can give charity through actions that cost nothing, including having sex with your wife. And from this, the text continues, in that case, what the wise husband must do is take care of his wife in that regard and give it priority over everything else so that he may keep her chaste, conceal her and meet her needs as much as he can, even if he does not have an urgent need for that and even if he had to do it only for her, for the sake of meeting his wife's needs. In that, there will be a reward for both of them, inshallah, and a means of help so that they attain spiritual and worldly well-being. Please note, by the way, that this bit of text here is not being directly attributed to anybody important. The only two people who matter in Islam are either Allah by quoting the Quran or Muhammad by quoting the Hadith which tell of the actions and views of Muhammad. If Muhammad didn't say it, and if it isn't in the Quran, it isn't worth anything. So instead, this is simply an interpretation of the authoritative text, and not an authoritative text itself, and it isn't a very good one. Muhammad in Sahih Muslim says that it's good to have sex with your wife, and from this we get the interpretation that the husband should have sex with the wife even when he doesn't want to, for the wife's pleasure. This is something not found in any primary sources. And then finally, this passage concludes, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, causing harm to the wife by not having intercourse is grounds for annulment in all cases, whether the husband did that intentionally or otherwise, and whether he was able to do it or not, it's like maintenance, and even more important. So Ibn Taymiyyah is confusingly the author of a book called Majmu' al-Fatawa. This is where I must frustratedly concede that I don't actually know who the author of this particular passage is, because there are several books with the same name published by different authors, and when I spoke to the person who brought this up, I simply copy and pasted the text, and now I can't find any evidence of this specific passage in any book available online. Now, I'm not suggesting that this passage is made up, but I think it's telling that this is the most progressive statement I can find on sexual relations in Islamic marriage, and it's from a book so obscure that I can't even find out who it's by. But regarding Ibn Taymiyyah, he was a controversial medieval theologian, and when the Wikipedia page starts off by saying he was controversial first and foremost, I think there needs to be a strong argument for why his teaching should go against all other sources. Anyway, so that's the best counter-argument I've seen, dealt with as best as I can, bearing in mind that the source they used to argue their case is so obscure that it was impossible for me to deal with it comprehensively since I couldn't even find it. Hey guys, this is probably going to be a really awkward split in the video because I felt like I just could not upload a video this long to a new channel. Like maybe if I'd been doing this for a while, people would want to watch an hour and a half long video, but no, so I split this. It's not a comfortable split. It's not where I would like to split it. I would like this whole video to stand alone as one holistic piece, but I just don't see that working. So in practice, I'm just going to upload 2 parts in immediate succession. So if you just click onto the next video, I'll leave a description, link in the description below. Just click straight onto it because this was originally recorded as one video to be watched all the way through. So just go there. The only reason why it's 2 parts is because I just thought people wouldn't click on an hour and a half video. So check it out. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, this is part 2 of the video. It's very much not something you can just jump into. You need to watch the first part. This was originally recorded as one video. Again, hopefully what I'm hoping is that most people here clicked here from the first video. And in that case, you probably just want me to stop talking so we can get into it. So that's basically it. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking. You can get into it.